go.
Hey everybody, this is producer Brian. Thank you for joining us for another episode of ASCII Anything. This week we have another Red Hat Advantage episode. This one's on AI automation and virtualization for modern enterprise. We hosted a virtual event that featured industry experts discussing how AI automation and virtualization are reshaping enterprise IT. This event is tailored for business leaders and decision makers who are seeking strategic insights into Red Hat's open source solutions. So enjoy.
I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon for the Red Hat Advantage. So today's session is designed to really connect some technology trends, AI, automation, virtualization, and establish real business outcomes. So we'll talk about, resilience, maybe faster innovation cycles, governance, cost optimization. But before we get into that, a few things for the audience and ways that you guys can participate. Obviously, any questions that you have, you want to put those into the chat. So we've got a few we're going to go through, but we're definitely reserving the last part of this session to answer any questions that the audience has. So that's one way you can participate. Also, there is a poll, and that poll is really helping us shape the 2026, Red Hat Advantage series. So in there, you'll find some questions about what topics you want to see. And so whether that's on Ansible or virtualization or deeper dives into some of the AI conversation, put your feedback in there. I am Sean McAdams. I'm one of the vice presidents here at Moser Consulting. I've been with Moser for a decade now. First 7 years of that is all in data and analytics space. Since 2023, I've been leading our infrastructure services and cloud technology. So I'll be moderating and trying to keep everybody on track today. But let's go around the room here with our panelists and let everybody do introductions. Dwight?
Hey, thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. Dwight French, and just a little bit about my background. I have been at the vortex of healthcare and technology for the better part of a quarter of a century, 25 years. I came to Red Hat about 5 years ago, really because of my passion for leading healthcare a little bit better than I found it, improving the experience for my family and friends. And I believe that all starts with democratizing data across our healthcare ecosystem, and really felt that Red Hat was the best place for me to be to fulfill that mission. Thanks.
Yeah, hi, my name is Matt Wren. I'm the Vice President of Procurement Services here at Moser Consulting. I've been in the IT space for almost 20 years myself. Excuse me. 11 of those years have been spent here at Moser. It's my 11th year anniversary this month. So I got Sean just by a little bit, not very much. I was fortunate enough to help set up our Red Hat partnership back in 2015, even though we've been doing, real work for a lot longer than that. We officially set that up with Red Hat in 2015, and then we became a full-blown procurement services organization back in 2023.
Awesome. Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom McGinnis. I'm a senior consultant here with Moser, and I've been with them about 4.5 years as of pretty much this week. I'm a certified Linux systems engineer, and just kind of chuffed to be on this panel with such learned people.
Yeah, so getting started, I'm going to start right here with you, Tom, and just kind of start kicking us off about containers and Kubernetes and why now? Why is that important now? Specifically, when we're talking about AI, there's a lot this year. 2025 was just, I think, the year of everybody trying to figure out AI. How does it apply to their business? So with that rapid evolution of IT, why do you think containers and Kubernetes have become such critical technology for modern businesses and how they're helping just reshape the way organizations approach scalability and innovation?
Well, I don't think you get to modern scalability without containers being in the mix. When virtualization came along and you could do VMs, it was a multiplying factor with instead of one dedicated box that handled a bunch of services, you could take the hardware at that time, dice it up, but inside of that box, you had it running a hypervisor that provided multiple servers. Well, that's a multiplier, but containers, Kubernetes, um, Docker, Podman, they're an exponential factor, um, where you could get, a multiple out of one piece of hardware with that same piece of hardware configured for Kubernetes or OpenShift host, whether it's bare metal or heck, you can even do it inside of VMware or some other hypervisor. You can take that one machine and now it is exponentially more useful to an organization. It can instantly spin up when clients log in. Now, our most common use of the internet in terms of containers is probably, let's say, some unnamed large online retailer. Don't know who that would be, but every time someone logs into this large online retailer, a set of containers is spun up to handle the transactions of what they're doing. The data is stored persistently on the back end in another persistent storage location, but the services and the web interface and the login function, the authorization, all of those are containers that handle pieces of the transaction. They spin up, they do what they need to do, and they collapse back down so that you have businesses are really getting incredibly, if you call it mileage for a car, it's so efficient. It's like tuning the car where you have the same engine, and instead of it running at 100 miles an hour, it now runs at 500 miles an hour, and it does 500 miles per gallon. It's that kind of leverage of efficiency that you've just got to be going to that. And of course, as you use more AI, as more AI tools come online, they're the ones kind of reaching out, the AI tools, and doing this spin up of needed services. You ask a question of an AI, okay, boom, it's going to spin up an instance of itself to handle this. And those are all containers as it comes online. So again, if you have some type of exponential use with containers on your hardware, what you have with AI is almost logarithmic. I mean, you're using the exponential factor of the containers plus this, new amazing software, I don't know what how do you qualify AI anymore? It's getting to be kind of ridiculous. I was talking with Matt Burnett on the way in today. He was driving me into this meeting, and we were talking about both AI and with quantum chips coming online. That's going to be some really exciting stuff in the next decade, I think.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on this, Dwight, that there's a little bit of a disconnect because a lot of times when we talk about Kubernetes or we want to talk about OpenShift, the management of, that, it's not aligned yet to AI because people are thinking about Gen AI and the tools that they're doing. They're not necessarily thinking about the approach of how they use infrastructure that's agnostic to really any cloud environment or on-prem. They're not thinking about that functional layer. Are you guys kind of seeing that as well? There's a little bit of a disconnect into, I want to take advantage of AI. There's a lot of questions about how does a company get their data to specific things that are AI, but they really haven't made the connection yet about their own development and doing models and deployments in containers. Do you see that as well, Dwight? What's your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're starting to take us into, infrastructure, right? And getting ready for AI, which most organizations are not. I know that healthcare being a $5 trillion industry is probably the biggest use case of not being ready for that, from data to sovereignty or to all of that. But before we get there, Sean, I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Tom was talking about because I think he nailed the technical how part of the question around containers, but I want to address the strategic why regarding the timing. So we're currently in a very vulnerable window. Sean, you kind of started it with 2025 and AI and everything that we've been experiencing. But one thing not regularly talked about in context to this disruptor is what I call the Broadcom gap. This is a really dangerous period where leaders, especially here in healthcare, are facing this massive pricing pressure from legacy virtualization, right? We've all heard about it, renewals up to 300 to 600%, while simultaneously facing the urgent need to deploy AI to remain competitive. So there's a temptation I'm seeing right now to simply hunt for a cheaper hypervisor to solve the billing crisis. But as a strategist, I have to warn that this optimizing for the past. If you just swap hypervisors, you might lower the bill for now, but you are still trapped in a legacy architecture that lacks the native GPU orchestration and the flexibility required for modern AI workloads. So I just want to kind of put that on the table while Tom had kind of responded to your question around containers, and you had kind of tipped off that this is. I mean, we've all got gray hair except for Matt, but he's been in healthcare 20
I'm
years,
awesome.
been in technology 20 years, and we've all seen technology disruptors. I for one have never seen anything like this. When you put those two together, it's not a matter of staying competitive and staying out in front. It's really a matter of survival.
And that's where I was going. I definitely want to talk about legacy systems, and we're going to have to talk about some governance there. Is that as organizations are trying to figure out how to use these advancements in technology, let's just stay into Gen AI. I don't think that they realize the importance of how they support the infrastructure in order to make. So the organizations that we talk to, maybe they go out and they'll implement something in a native cloud provider. Doesn't matter which one, right? Everybody can go out there. But what happens is you end up then seeing each team create sort of their own pattern. You have slightly different architectures because marketing wants to do something with AI and sales and the business wants to do something with AI. And I'm not, marketing people are laughing here. I'm not picking on you guys, but this is the reality of what we see when we don't step back and look at the architecture itself and how are we going to do something that is governed, that has cost control, that has the same security so that we can kind of limit the drift. And so I was just interested in everybody's take in the AI conversation, if they've had any this year, and maybe Dwight coming from a Red Hat or a perspective has, but it's not been a common conversation this year. It's been about the tech, it's been about the use case, it's been how do we do our own model development, and we really kind of have to pull it back a little bit because otherwise organizations are going to have a lot of technical debt as they go into AI because they're going to do things just a lot differently.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So what's your guys' kind of take and feedback as it relates, to that?
I think it's a little different from a sales perspective because a lot of salespeople are wanting to use AI or they're having to use AI because it speeds up the process. But to your point, if there's no governance around it, they're just going to go grab what they want. And depends on what industry that you're in. And we'll talk about this a little later, but the governance piece is critical to that. I know, Sean, we've been to conferences where they're like, ChatGPT is amazing. Not going to disagree. There's truthful facts, there's untruthful facts, but can it speed up their day if they're trying to do something? 100% it can. But if they're not putting the parameters around it, and I know from a healthcare perspective, that's scary because they're we don't want to slow them down from what they're doing. We just want to protect them. And at the end of the day, if they can speed up their job to, if it's in the ABA world, hypothetically, and they want to help the kids better, we're all for that, but we want to make sure that data is protected. So I do think AI is coming out through, doesn't matter what industry it is being used more and more by everybody, but it's just not being governed correctly.
Yeah, and the question I really have is, I think just bringing folks into a reality of how does containerization help as it relates specifically to building and deploying your own model. I think it's not talked enough about.
Behind
We
the
talk
scenes.
about, the high competitors in AI, the platforms. Yeah, we want to get Claude into our IDE. We want to do, feature requests into a team of agents that a developer is running. And we're not stepping back enough to talk about the infrastructure that runs on that. We're literally taking it for granted a little bit, because we're all tied into an organization. I'm going to put myself in a business. We're tied into a specific, cloud provider. I call them arms dealers. We're tied into a particular one, and then we try to, focus it that way. And one of the things I think I wanted to get across before we tackle some other topics that people aren't talking enough about is how containerization really can help that type of workload be independent from your cloud provider. So if you want to get into later, hey, where would this workload best fit? This is where a solution like OpenShift can really make a large impact for an organization or a business.
Well, going back to or addressing the governance idea of it, what containers are great at doing is providing a business with the services that they know they need. Large online retailers are going to have and going to know, okay, we're going to need in any transaction that happens with somebody logging onto our website, there's certain things that we need to happen for this experience to pass. And they're not going to be looking at medical records. So what the containerization allows them to do particularly in terms of governance and AI, is a container is a set image. While it's flexible in getting you from A to B and spinning up other pieces that it needs, kind of assembling the Lego model, there's only so many Lego models that a large online retailer would present. It won't present your health information. So you are able to, as a business, by defining what your containers are and how they interact with each other inside of a large container management platform like OpenShift, is in that image level, define where your guardrails are.
Yeah.
Like I said, they're not going to break out. You, as the business, really go, we only need this. Boom. And you write it and you code it and you test it. But hey, if it breaks, pull it out, rework the image, and only present that to the client. You get to kind of hold back your cards, and only you put on the table those containers you feel safe to present to them. And in AI, that's going to be crucial.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things and one of the points I wanted to get across. And it is a little bit technical in what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, though, to be able to centralize your data, the notebooks that are being used, or the code, the deployment, the pipelines, all into the environment that is containerized. And now I can take that also workload anywhere.
Yeah.
I'll go through a merger or acquisition and I have what I think is a competitive advantage of a model, but the acquisition is all in on a different cloud provider. Doesn't matter because I've set up the architecture correctly.
Yeah, containers are the same.
That's right.
Your containers are the same, which are going to be different from somebody else's containers. You get to make that decision.
Yeah, but I also get to capitalize on investments that I've made because I'm not tied to a specific. If I want to bring it on-prem because we're talking about data, sovereignty, I can do that.
Yep.
So that's one of the things I think that people aren't connected with. And I'm hoping in 2026 that we can kind of get more education out about the importance of the architecture beyond just the data architecture that makes AI, a reality for organizations. With that said, though a lot of organizations are going to be struggling through their legacy systems and in a way that might hinder, innovation. How should business leaders approach challenges with legacy systems as it relates to the data readiness, data bias, data sovereignty that I just kind of brought up when they're modernizing their IT infrastructure?
That's a loaded question, Sean. There's a lot to unpack there. Let me start here. So when we talk about legacy systems, and trust me, we have a lot of them in healthcare. Um, um, Holding back, it's all about holding back on innovation. So the real issue is that you simply can't scale AI, and let's just face it, today innovation is all about figuring out agentic workflows, right? That's here. It's not going away. It's coming in a big way. I was just at both KubeCon and Health Conference in the last 2 months, and walking an exhibit hall the size of probably 10 football fields. And if you didn't have agentic AI workflows on your booth, then you probably didn't get admitted in there. But the real issue that is again that you just simply can't scale AI without first modernizing your information architecture. There's no AI without IA. I just made that up. I don't know if that's a term or not, but
It actually is a term. I think this maybe back in 23, we had done a session, and I'm trying to remember the partner that was with, and that literally, Dwight, was the title of it. Because as we were trying to prepare people still today for AI, it really comes back to your information architecture. So you're 100% true.
well, Sean, I made a career out of R&D, rob and distribute. So I probably did hear that and just made it my own. But in healthcare, so most organizations they're operating on decades old platforms where critical data it's fragmented, it's delayed, it's inconsistent, and AI will only amplify those weaknesses. Right. So it is a tsunami coming. And what we're seeing is business leaders starting to focus on building modern data foundations. So making data accessible in real time, standardizing it through frameworks like FHIR. And that's FHIR for those of you that aren't aware of it. Stands for Fast Health Interoperability Resources. I was talking to some 30 somethings the other day, and they got really excited when I said FHIR. They thought it standed for um, fast retirement. So I want to be clear here. This has to do with a framework, right, for interoperability, and it's a part of the interoperability ruling and prior authorization final law that came into place a couple of years inside of healthcare. So that basically mandates that every healthcare entity has to give up through an API on the FHIR framework information about their member, their patient, anything that they have. So we're moving in that direction. But governing it is so biased. It's identified and mitigated early. So not after models are in production, right? So we were talking about somebody brought up sovereign data, right? And so the White House is going to be putting out a ruling probably by the end of the week, a policy on sovereign data. What's interesting is that the current administration is moving us towards one policy. So they're trying to take away from the states their ability to have policies around AI. If the fact that we've recently, allowed NVIDIA to sell their HP 200 chips to China, the indication is that we're moving towards commerce and revenue versus having actual responsible AI. But the fact of the matter is that each state still has, especially in regulated industries like healthcare, each state has very specific regulations around PHI, patient health information, HIPAA related things. Here in California, we happen to know that the state has put a law in place that no data can go outside of the state that has to do with reproduction or gender, because they want to protect that information being used against somebody in another state illegally. So it's a law now in the state that you actually have to mask that data and be very careful. So you times that times 50, along with now we have this AI ruling, right, that could go a very different way. It gets really, really complicated. So, and the dirty little lie about AI is that 80% of it is data. Talk to any data scientist, right? They spend 80% of their time cleaning data. And when you talk about the massive amounts of data locked up in silos inside of healthcare, really, accelerating innovation, modernization, conversations going to get off of just models and large language models and where we're at right now, and it's going to start moving to infrastructure. So making data accessible in real time, standardizing it through frameworks like FHIR, and at the same time, we can't overlook data sovereignty, as I mentioned. But the good news is modernization doesn't require ripping out legacy systems. That would be a showstopper. It is about creating an interoperable, standards-based architecture that connects them to modern platforms in a secure, governed way. If we get the data and architecture right, AI stops being a science experiment and becomes a reliable engine for better outcomes, operational efficiency, and more equitable care inside of healthcare.
I love the statement about being a science experiment because I think that's kind of where a lot of organizations are right now, and companies are looking to move from experimentation into repeatability, right? Into validated architectures with guardrails and automation, and they're not having to reinvent these containers every week.
Yeah.
And I to your point, when you say, hey, we're going, basically from what we have as an over focus on models to an under focus on governance, is that we kind of expect maybe 2026 to be an inverse of that, where the focus starts to become more on the governance, which is delivered through, infrastructure.
I think so. I mean, I know inside of healthcare, and again, I know I reference it a lot, but I don't think it's that different than any other industry out there. What I saw last year was the cats were let out of the barn, right? Everybody had access to, a 38 revolver, Chat GPT. And I saw organizations starting to try to get the cats back in the barn. And they started to squash innovation. You had we're in a very schizophrenic environment right now, right? Where every board out there is saying, "What are you doing with AI? We're going to be irrelevant if you don't get moving on this. Oh, by the way, don't do anything that's going to put me in jail." So it's hurry up, innovate. And so one of the things that I'm starting to say is we got to move slow to move fast, right? And we're starting to see, like, for example, with Sutter Health, which is one of the pretty good sized health systems that we worked with. Dr. Ashley BC, she's their chief A officer. And she talks about not just buying technology, but building organizational readiness. So they established a digital academy and a Teams channel where over 1,000 employees share ideas on prompt engineering and use cases. And so by doing this, they've democratized innovation. They have clinicians innovating individual using a secure internal large language model and small language models, because they're seeing, as you get into disease states, it's not about the size of the data, it's about the quality of the data and the use of the data. So we're seeing this, real move towards, everything's about use cases and inside of healthcare. And that's what's driving everybody towards these small language models. But this is critical for protection. So their governance team, and this is really important. and I think everybody should really kind of listen to this. Their governance team includes legal, compliance, and clinical informatics working together, right? This is a platform issue, and this is a consortium, and this is one case where the silos you talked earlier, Sean, about tech debt. Well, what's happened in 30 years, 30 decades, 40 decades in healthcare is yes, we've created a lot of tech debt, but because of the stovepipe organizations, because of the monolithic technology, we had to create process debt and people debt. That's the hard part to break down around this because, as Tom was talking about, containers are fundamental to cloud native, right? And everybody's like, oh, I hear organizations at the beginning of the journey say, I want to be cloud first. The reality is what they're really saying is, I want to be like Netflix. I want to be like Google. Well, what that means is they want a cloud native operating model. And that is massive transformation that you've got to be thinking about culture. And I think that technology can be a part of helping that cultural change, as Tom really talked well about with containers, because it's fundamental. But if you don't address the consortium and the cross departmental requirement to move towards a cloud native operating model, you're going to be figuring it out 3-4 years down the road, and it may be too late.
Yeah, so I feel like what you're saying is, hey, key to modernization. Everybody is focusing on technology right now. It's actually a data governance problem first. And for organizations that skip that step, they're just going to be facing a lot of rework, AI failures, security issues, if they don't tackle sort of this data governance problem first.
100%.
And if I could piggyback real fast on that, it's to the points that we were just talking about, but from an OEM AI story, right? There's organizations that are looking at, depends on if it's their network, right? They're looking at to see, because AI is first, who has the best AI story currently. And I'm seeing a lot of that made from decisions before. It doesn't matter which one it is, but they're looking at, show me your case studies of what is done here, because as the leader of IT, I have to push forward with AI, and they may not have the best case studies out there. Then if still that different OEM might be the best one for AI. It's more right now, it's the rat race. Who has it out there first that they can start looking at it and reading at it. So that might get implemented over another technology because they may not have put that case out there. I know we have issues with that all the time of, we're looking at this technology because maybe it's ChatGPT or whatever it is that said this is the best AI tool for the network.
Yeah, I mean, that's a competitive landscape, right? So we've all seen this before, and you're going to see it bounce around through different providers because they sell software. And so they've got to compete with one another. Businesses want to take advantage of those solutions. But what we've got to try to draw them back to here is how prepared is their organization from an infrastructure perspective to be able to do that. Because this year, to me, was a lot of focus in on AI policy. There probably wasn't a company who didn't rewrite their acceptable use policy, add in some AI policies, whether it was in their employee handbook or if it was technically how we're going to evaluate tools, right? And this is what we're going to work through in order to make sure that we adopt the right ones and they meet certain controls for our security framework.
If I could, Sean, I loved your comment, Dwight. You said about handing out a 38 revolver to everybody, and I think that socially we're at a point where, fortunately, these discussions are happening a lot sooner in technological evolution. With the web, it came out and it was huge, and then, oh my God, this is great. And then we started to see some of the backlash, the trolling, the bullying. Similarly, Web 2.0 comes out, social media, and oh my God, this is great. And in the recent years, we've seen, well, there's a boomerang effect to having social media out there and what its impact is on society. And I think I'm witnessing a lot more caution a lot sooner with AI than had happened with these previous technologies that were kind of unleashed on the world. And I think we've burned our fingers enough that we're like, okay, this is great, but And these discussions are happening a lot sooner than had previously. So I think there's a positive sign on that. And I think you're right that hopefully 2026 will be the big discussion of governance. But it's kind of already been out there.
Sure.
It's been lingering out there where people are like you said, Dwight, there's a 38 revolver for everybody. Well, at least we're recognizing the awesomeness that these tools bring to our fingertips.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that we're starting to see from our more advanced customers, and we're starting to advocate for this going forward, is a governance model that is a hybrid between a center of excellence and a community of practice, right? So, the COE, that's kind of the shield. This is your centralized team. They're responsible for the hard governance. They establish the platform standards. They manage the GPU efficiency. There's a real cost issue that's going to be coming once we start inferencing some of these models and agentic workflows. It ensures immutable audit trails. This protects the company and its officers by ensuring that every AI decision is traceable, auditable, compliant with the sovereign laws that we were talking about earlier. And then the COP is really the accelerator, right? Because we have to have learning. I mean, learning is happening like crazy. And if we try to, funnel learning through a narrow pipe to our enterprise, we're just not, we're gonna be slow, right? We're gonna be late to the game. So simultaneously to the COE, you foster an open organization, community of practice. This is where Red Hat, this is where our DNA is, right? Upstream and open source culture and organizations. It's decentralized. It allows developers and in my case, clinicians to experiment rapidly within the safety of the sandbox provided by the COE. And that sandbox, right, could have a technical element to it, like you were talking about, Tom. It could be, OpenShift AI, and where we're doing fast fail. And this is how you get massive learning by allowing peer-to-peer knowledge and sharing rather than top-down dissemination, but you have the guardrails, right, of the COE. And what I'm seeing on my top tier customers is they're putting a lot of effort into that part of it, right? That's what I mean by when I say they're going slow in order to move fast. They're renegotiating all of their MSAs because we've got a lot of COT systems in healthcare. And they want to make sure that they can turn off the AI that's coming in through their incumbent folks. Those kinds of things are being done right now because they want to move fast. They want to innovate fast, but they got to do it safely and responsibly.
I mean, what you're saying is order to move slow to go fast. If I just say what you're saying a little bit different is, hey, establish processes early so that you can enable more freedom later. Because
Right.
you want the champions that are in COP to really drive stuff, and you've taken away the burden of the guardrails, and all the things that need to be put in place through your center of excellence because you've established those guidelines and guardrails early.
That's right. And I have a podcast called Dare to Innovate in Healthcare. And the premise of that is healthcare has outsourced innovation largely to their vendors. That's why we have so many COT systems. That's why they have so much IT debt, because they solve one problem at a time with the COTS vendor. And what we're saying is, if you don't innovate at this time, you're going to be out of business. You've got the tech vendors that are disrupting the business. They're trying to come in and deal with the cost burden that we all experience every day as customers of healthcare. And if you don't innovate, you're going to be out of business. So start with your data infrastructure, put your governance in place, and then start innovating, right? But the only way to do that is with good platform engineering practices, and a good open architecture, right? That is not proprietary, doesn't lock you into yet another platform, that you have control of your own future.
So let's dig in that just for a minute because I want to move then and talk about some ROI. But you brought up OpenShift AI. You actually brought up a few things. You brought up OpenShift AI. You brought up, hey, there is distinguishing things that business are doing to separate their models rather than putting everything into one. And we have a large language model. There is more investment going into these models that are more fit for purpose, right? These smaller, data models. So I think it's important for anyone that's listening here to understand OpenShift AI, those two deployment mechanisms, and lastly, what you just specified is being in an open platform so that I'm not locked to specific things. And so here's my understanding of this. And I want you guys to kind of chime in if I get something wrong here or kind of correct this, but model development is kind of model development. You're going to have data, you're going to have a process. All that code and stuff is going to live somewhere. So let's say that's being built. An organization has invested into building a specific model. Now, what do we have to do though? We have to make a decision of how I'm going to get that out to who's ever going to consume it, most likely in some API interface like you had already specified. So within OpenShift AI, you have the ability to really serve it up in those kind of two ways. Do I want the large language model? It's probably going to be by itself, and I'm going to be able to control the infrastructure and the resources that kind of get put to that. Or am I going to have a mesh, I believe it is, of smaller models, and I can release them together, but they are independent kind of small models. So with OpenShift AI, you kind of get the ability to take your models, you're going to bring them to object storage. You can decide how you want to serve them in one of these two ways. If you're going to, hey, let's just isolate this one model, we're going to kind of control the resources as it relates to it, or we're going to create sort of this community, of models so that you can kind of take that to the business, or more importantly, I think a lot of organizations are going to be using information they have and creating a competitive edge or data products that they'll sell, giving that out to their consumers. And how can they do that in a way that is not going to be tied to specific, platforms?
As I was saying, I kind of favor the mesh idea. I think that, this is still such a young field that, obviously you've got the large language models. For the business purposes, like I said, not everybody needs everything. The large online retailer doesn't need to be presenting health data. Health insurance providers do need to be presenting that. What are the pieces? And I think that there is going to be a mesh where they define, okay, we need this smaller model. Okay, but it also needs to interact with other pieces. And so there's going to be, this is our focus, but we will need this module. We'll need this type of module. It could be really interesting because where you've got certain companies focusing on this, let's call it small to medium sized language model, because they're dealing with like healthcare. It's going to be a lot of data.
Sure.
But there might be a piece that they need to interact with it. And there might be a vendor that comes along that isn't this language model, but it handles this particular piece that they need for the transaction. So there could be, I think it's going to be a mesh of this, what they need, and some ancillary pieces, or they're going to be buying in or a licensed in this piece from another vendor. So that's just my personal belief. I don't, we're all guessing.
Well, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going in the polls, but I kind of want to jump ahead of whatever is coming in from folks that are doing there and think like Red Hat Advantage 2026 of somewhere in the series. We kind of have to deep dive into OpenShift AI and the deployment of those models and how that foundational architecture is beneficial to organizations when they're trying to determine where to put these things and not tie them into native platforms. That was my little technical rant for a second, I guess. But bringing it back, to return on investment and scalability and procurement, that's when it comes to those things, I think modernization is kind of seen as a necessity rather than a choice. And how can organizations ensure that their modernization efforts are driven by real business value rather than just these external pressures that everyone is kind of getting? And then what role do partners, particularly in procurement or in services, really play in achieving that success?
Yeah, I mean, I was at a conference earlier this, well, it's about a month and a half ago, but with and had Jay McBain speak, and Jay's very well known in the industry of sharing data of how people procure, what partner does it, or what kind of trends. And for this was a large organization of timeline of buying, and from a timeline of buying, I mean, it can take 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months of making decisions of what they're going through. So they start interviewing each different OEM and start talking to them, but they only talk to them potentially from an OEM on that side. But really, who's driving that is the consultants. The consultants that they've been working with that understand what they're trying to do, because these consultants have been in there majority of time for a lot longer than that. They understand their business efforts and they understand the different technologies. I don't really care what cloud program or what cloud partner it is, if it's on-prem, if it's hybrid, or if it's full cloud. That consulting company is going to be driving, in this case of the timeline to buy of AWS potentially came and sold it by themselves. The consulting company was pushing Azure, and AWS had no clue that this other company was being pushed, and it wasn't the best thing for their organization at that time, and vice versa. It's going to happen, but it's from the consulting companies knowing all the different technologies and being technology agnostic for their organization so they can share different opportunities. Now, it still be technology agnostic, and that partner may not be able to deliver it. And that's why I really, really push out there partner to partner. I know Red Hat has a great program to do that as well. We have a lot of Red Hat consultants internally, and for us, we want to make sure they're fully billable, right? Because they're not cheap resources. And if you have a good sales team or a good marketing team bringing in leads for that, you got to be able to still then have other people or hire other people to capitalize on an opportunity for them. Well, in this case, everybody in our organization's busy. So where do we go? Do we turn down the business? Nobody really wants to turn down the business. And so that's why I think Red Hat has done a phenomenal job of building this partner to partner community, where if there is an OpenShift opportunity, an OpenShift AI, an automation play with Ansible, right, that we can utilize another partner to come in there to help us work on that with them. And I think that's across a lot of different OEMs, because at the end of the day, if we can still discount procurement services, right, because everybody right now is trying to save money, but we can still then bring the consulting to them, it's a big help for that. As cost is still everybody's number one thing. You're not going to see anybody, oh, I'm not lowering my cost this year. They're going to lower their costs. They're going to have to meet it doesn't matter if they're publicly traded or if they're private. They still have people where they have to answer their numbers for that too. So from a procurement side, I mean, I always look at what's best for your organization and see if you can save money. I know that's one thing that we lead by from our procurement side. We separate it from consulting. That's where we can come in and just save money and look at your costs that they are, and then we bring in our consultants to bring in the right technology, and they're not incentivized and form that too. So they're not pushing technologies that's not right for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to obviously create business value, not because a vendor specifically says so. And so Tom, Dwight, when you're talking about organizations and they're trying to align these specific use cases, to that, you had brought up a implementation strategy. I just heard that you said, Dwight, and I forget the exact phrase, but it was essentially bringing a community together where their ideas and stuff can go to. So that foundational concept of an organization having some type of a continuous improvement process in place to gather those, I think is going to be obviously super critical. What are the things are you guys seeing just to help organizations align first on business value?
I'm going to fling that one over to Dwight.
Yeah, look, IDC put a report out. We're seeing this. 80% of IT budgets are shifting to line of business. You have to ask the question why, right? And I see anecdotally this supporting this, which is organizations aren't getting the return on investment for IT. And the problem is that they spent 30 years, as I mentioned earlier, building these monolithic architectures, and now all of their budget is going to maintaining those. we were working with an organization around digital transformation, and we were getting into the metrics and really in problem definition. And we found that one line of business leader in member engagement for a health plan had $13 million of budget, and 70% of it was going back into rework. That same customer had the largest instance of facets, which is the big claims
Sure.
vendor out
Yeah.
there. And they were just continuously upgrading and trying, because they customized it beyond recognition. And so all their budget was basically, and if anybody knows health insurance, right? This is their family jewels, right? This is what they run their business on. It's what they're known for, is processing claims and paying providers. And they were spending all their budget on just maintaining this monolith, right? So now the line of business are starting to take control of the purse strings, and what they need is value. They need strategic value. So I was mentioned earlier about how this is a cultural period, if ever there was one, right? The silos have to be broken down. And now IT, it's not about power shifting from IT. IT needs to go into the boardroom and be a part of the strategic conversations that's happening once a year, right? Used to be, the executives go into the boardroom, they do the planning, and then they give a budget to the IT executives, and then it gets cadenced down to projects, and that's how the budgets work. What we're starting to see with the top tier of our customers is IT's in the boardroom while they're putting their strategy together for the business. When that happens, then the use cases that we need to figure out what we're going to do with AI that's going to affect the business flow from that process. So
Yeah.
this is transformational.
Feel like IT should have seen that shift coming, just with the emergence of SaaS products, and obviously a lot of folks in the space of creating technical products are doing it with the business in mind. There are some that are doing it with IT because we want developers and things to be better and faster, but a majority of software development and stuff is built for the business in mind. So you see a decentralization of the administration of specific things, not security, not governance, not some of those things move away from IT, but you definitely see that shift with businesses empowering, companies empowering the business to take ownership of specific, products, which they should be driving the alignment of how we're going to use these products to deliver business value.
You had
Yeah.
mentioned or asked the question of is fear kind of driving businesses to upgrade versus actual need? And going back to part of the conversation of move slow to move fast. I think every business should not grab at the big shiny thing.
Sure.
Grabbing the shiny thing is not a good strategy. Step back, take your time, examine it. You're going to save more money and probably get more customers and work out better in the long run if you make a considered target. Pick the target, know what you want to hit, and design your strategy for that. Pick out what it is you really need. Don't grab at it. Don't go for the shiny. Go for what you need in your business.
Yeah, I think there's a balance there. And I think there are a lot of businesses who do respond maybe out of fear.
Yeah.
The statement I'm about to make can kind of align to that, but it's not meant to align to that. It's meant to align to your point, strategic plans for a particular organization. But I do think it is important for business leaders to sit down as they're looking at digital transformation and understand or answer this question: what happens if we do nothing? And that's not a fear-based comment, right? It's meant to really get an organization to think strategically about, all right, if we sit back and we do nothing, what happens? Because a lot of time in that ROI discussion, you need to consider the cost of staying the same usually exceeds the cost of transforming.
and they're going to have to move. It's just pick where you want to move to.
Mm-hmm.
Don't stagnate, definitely, but don't rush into it either.
Or even adding into what a lot of companies now are aligning it back to certain business units of charging what IT costs, because not a lot of them understand how much is invested into IT, right? And we're seeing that based on locations now, where they're having to say, if you break this laptop, we're actually going to charge you to refix it, right? If they don't have the warranties, and fully diving into how much IT really costs. That could be a fear too, because they're like, well, now this is a part of my budget. Where should we go? Or should it be not a fear and say, let's adopt this? Let's find things that can make us automate AI that makes it more cost effective for the organization, because actually I care about spending that because it's with my bottom dollar now too.
Yeah, so kind of as we kind of close down here, it's just some final thoughts. I'm going to go around, and really kind of tying it back to, something I think Red Hat's really suited for, and it goes back to things that Dwight had said: start small, prove value, scale fast. That's the underlying thing. Based on the things that we've talked about a lot of stuff today: AI, modernization, digital transformation, return on investments, things specific into healthcare and data governance. What's the one thing, if a listener was to take away, in your opinion, based on what you had, the one thing that they should go spend some time and look into this thing as we kind of close out 2025 in preparation for 2026? What would it be? Dwight, let me start with you.
Yeah, I would say, number one, bring the business and the IT folks together underneath the same roof. Get aligned very tightly on where the business is going, and make sure that the IT strategy is, hard coded to that. Second thing I would say is ask questions about your data. Know where it's at, know what standards it's based on, understand, that is your most valued asset right now in this new AI economy going forward. And then the third thing I would remind everybody is focus on open architecture. Everybody is almost paralyzed with, I can't modernize. It's too late, right? And if you have the data problem fixed and you have an open architecture, you can have a bridge strategy in place that gets you out of the VMware, puts those legacy workloads inside of OpenShift Vert, and now you've got modern, legacy workloads sitting inside of a modern container, and now you can start building those business-driven AI use cases, right, around those legacy workloads and modernize, one brick at a time going forward. You can do this, right? But you got to have a good strategy, and you got to understand that you got to move slow in order to go fast.
Things you guys want to add?
I mean, I 100% agree. Business and IT together. I think we all will agree with that. But from my perspective, is asking yourself, do you have the right partners? Okay. What I mean by that is are they coming in not just to resell you or push paper on you, but they're actually understanding your business, and are they bringing in other opportunities to talk about what you're trying to do from a business perspective, and the IT bring that back together? Are they bringing that for you? Are they bringing in other partners that maybe that's not their specialty, but they've talked to different OEMs, they've talked to other consulting companies that they'd be like, we don't do this, but you need to talk to these guys and gals because they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I would say if someone listening is unsure about that statement, because obviously it's coming from an IT provider, they can go out and do research about the effectiveness or the success and failure rates of organizations implementing strategies that we've talked about today and doing it by themselves. Yes. And it's not very high.
100%. Pick your partners carefully right now.
Yeah. And then I would add on to that, don't stay just in your industry. Be aware of what's going on in your industry. But if you're not going to step out and look outside of your industry and things that people are doing, and is this applicable to, our products and services? I think that's a miss too. Anything you want to add, Tom?
It might seem counterintuitive, but as we transition into the brave, scary new world, and looking at cleaning house or changing things up, don't chuck everything with it. Keep some type of legacy systems so that you can use it as resources to train up the generation that you're gonna have running your stuff right now, because it's not going to go away overnight. We talk about virtualization being kind of yesterday's news, and it is, but you're still going to have VMs for a while. So keep some of that gear around. Absolutely be investing in the future, but also don't get rid of the past completely. If you're not there yet, you've got to learn it. You've got to be comfortable with where things are with containers, where things are with AI. That'll be a few years down the road. And when you're there, and then you can get rid of that old crap.
Or is it past is just recycled in something new?
Yeah, it's true. I'm the guy that drives a 50-year-old car, so.
As a white beard guy, I resemble that advice, Tom, and support it. Do not throw the old out with the new.
Awesome. Well, Dwight, Tom, Matt, thank you guys so much for hanging out here for this past hour, and all those that are listening now or in the future. Today we talked about tools. It's not really, it's about tools. It is about the strategy. And a part of that, is looking at open source, getting the right partners in place. And so obviously, if people have questions about that, we definitely love for them to reach out and continue that discussion specifically to their needs or uses. If you have questions, you didn't get them out today, feel free to drive those in to us, and also on what you guys want to talk about in 2026 in the Red Hat Advantage. I look forward to those continued conversations next year. So thank you guys for your time, and I appreciate all the listeners. And until next time. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Ciao.
We hope you enjoyed listening to our webinar discussing the Red Hat Advantage when it comes to how AI automation and virtualization are reshaping modern enterprise IT. Be sure and join us next time as we dive even deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. And don't forget to share your ideas or topics with us on social media. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.
Go.